Hi everyone, it's Laurie. I hope this finds you doing well and happy. It's been a long time since I did a video. I'm eager to get back, and I've really missed talking to all of you and being part of this part of the tarot community, so I'm glad to be back. I thought I would start back by talking about the obvious name change that I did. I had a couple of internet domain names, and I kind of had to decide if I wanted to pay money and renew them or if I just wanted to let them go. And the Lotus Intuitive domain name was one of them. Why did I pick them in the first place? Why did I pick these, in the first place? And in the case of the Lotus Intuitive name, it was really happenstance, and something happens, I go with the flow, and I do a lot of things that way. That's kind of my MO. That's how I ended up having a professional Reiki practice. A lot of you might know that I am a Reiki master teacher, and I have been in private practice since, is it 4 years or 5 years? I think it's 5 years. I originally started out because my husband had 3 strokes in his brainstem at the age of 46. He had been in the ICU for a long time, and then he was off work for a long time, and it took a year of investigating to find out why he'd had these strokes, because they weren't clots, they hadn't been embolisms or anything like that. Finally, we spent all our money and all our retirement and the equity that we had in the house, and ended up at Cleveland Clinic, which is a specialty hospital here in the United States. And he went from doctor to doctor to doctor until they finally found out that he has a genetic connective tissue disease that doesn't actually have a name. It's inherited, it's in the DNA. Our children have been checked, and they don't seem to have it, but it doesn't have a name. His DNA is at the University of Texas, where they're doing genetic research, and maybe they'll find out what it is at some point, or maybe they won't. But in the meantime, because there wasn't any medical cure or treatment for what he has, and we were always into, I had always done homeopathy and essential oils and acupuncture and different things like that, and I decided to take a Reiki level 1 class to start doing Reiki on my husband, which I did, and then on me and on our kids and on our pets. And then after a few months I took Reiki level 2, and as part of my Reiki level 2, my Reiki master said she wanted me to spend some time treating some people that were outside of my family, which I thought would be impossible to do because I didn't think I'd be able to find anybody who wanted free Reiki. And I was wrong. I mean, it turns out when you say free Reiki, that a lot of people want it. So I did Reiki on them, and they wanted to come back. And I said to my Reiki master, these people want to come back. What should I do? And she said, well, let them come back. And then they wanted to pay me. And I said, they want to pay me. What should I do? And she said, well, let's have a talk. And so that's how I ended up opening a business becoming a practitioner. I opened up a business, and I got the certifications and insurance and all the rigmarole you have to do to have your own business, and comply with the state laws and all that. And then my Reiki master invited me to become a Reiki master student, which we do as an apprenticeship over many, many years. I know lots of different Reiki practices do it different ways. That's the way ours does. It's like Jedi, where you have a student and a master. And I joke about that, but it really kind of is like that, because that is the way it works. And so I was an apprentice for many years, and then I became a Reiki master myself. Then I started teaching. So I started teaching classes out of my home and practicing out of my home. And, it happened. It just kind of happened. And I went with the flow, jumped on the train, go with the flow. That's similar to how I began homeschooling my kids in 1989. I was pregnant with our first child, and I was working at a women's center, and I worked with a woman who homeschooled her children because they were concert pianists, and they needed like extra time to practice. And she was telling me about all the really amazing things they did. They read these great books, and they talked about them, and they went out in nature, and They drew from nature, and they did art and music and visited museums and all kinds of things that just sounded like a really cool way to learn. And so I came home and talked to Eric about it and said, oh, this sounds cool. What do you think? You want to do this? And he was like, well, I don't know. You know, what the heck? We can try it. If any of our kids want to go to school, they can just go to school. And they never wanted to go to school. So I homeschooled them all. We lived on one income. We lived in rental houses, and I gardened and cooked from scratch, and we didn't have a TV. And early on in our homeschooling life, I discovered Rudolf Steiner and Waldorf style of education, which is a very therapeutic, spiritually based form of education. The underlying concept would be that children incarnate into their bodies the same way humans have incarnated upon the earth over the span of humankind. So in similar ways, there are similar eras in humankind, and there's similar eras in the life of the child. That's really an abbreviated way of talking about it. And so you try to meet the child's need accordingly as they're incarnated, to help them incarnate, you know, physically first, and then as they come into their etheric bodies, and then their astral bodies, and then their I, or the ego. And anyway, so there wasn't a lot written at the time that I started doing this in the early 90s. And I read and I studied, and I wrote my own materials when I couldn't find materials, and I joined email lists, and I ended up running some email lists, and I ended up doing consulting work with other parents and helping them. And I was a guest on some radio shows, and did some guest blogging, and I wrote a book about Waldorf homeschooling, which is still in manuscript form because I've never published it. I don't think I'm ever going to do that. I mainly wrote it for my kids so they knew what I did and how I did it, in case they were ever interested, so they wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel like I had to do. And I did that for 25 years. That was like my full-time job. And several years ago, I began studying on my own with my psychic intuitive teacher, Anna Sace. And I've been studying with her for several years now. The first class that I took many years ago was on Akashic record reading. And as at the end of the course, if I wanted to become certified by her, which you can if you want to, you don't have to, I needed to read for strangers, again, for guinea pigs. And I didn't think I would find 5 people who wanted free Akashic record readings in return for feedback and constructive criticism and things like that. And I ended up capping it at 15 because it takes a long time to do the reading, and they really the people, they were happy, and I was happy, and I thought that maybe I would start doing readings professionally, or maybe not. People kept asking me if they could send their friends or their family members to me. And actually, after that, I started Anna's Level 2 course, which does advanced readings, relationship, career, decision-making, spirit guide readings, things like that. I'm still working through that Level 2 course right now. And I'm going to need 25 guinea pigs in order to finish that. So I may be putting out a call at some point for people who would be willing to have free readings in exchange for the constructive feedback. That is really loud music. Hang on one second. Okay, I'm back. So as I was thinking, you know, would I do professional readings or not? And I happened to pick Lotus Intuitive. It sounded pleasant enough, harmless enough, like, you know, wouldn't put people off or scare them. It sounded spiritual, but not too weird. I like the idea of a lotus. A lot of adult survivors really identify with the concept of lotus because it's a flower that starts in the mud and then blooms out of the mud to be this beautiful, pure thing. And the saying, you know, no mud, no lotus. And the Lotus is also a very expensive car. I found that out when I did some Googling. That is so not me. I don't know if any of you get the Dharma Crafts catalog. It's a catalog of like spiritual supplies, spiritual things and meditation, and I think it's kind of Buddhist related or whatever, but it's a very glitzy catalog, and the stuff is totally over the top, you know, silk things and very high market stuff. It's, you know, I mean, stuff's nice. I've never bought anything from it. And our kids always joke with the Dharma crafts, it should say Dharma crafts. It costs a lot to live a simple life because the stuff in there is very expensive. And that's just not me. I didn't know how much I still even identified with it, with the no mud, no lotus, if I wanted to still be in that place. It was happenstance and the parenting and happenstance homeschooling, and just finished homeschooling in May when our youngest finished school, and now she's off taking college classes, and very happy at that, which gives me a ton more time because I'm not writing materials and I'm not overseeing all that stuff all day. So that's the first time in a very long time, that since the early 90s, that I haven't been doing that. And happenstance happened with my Reiki business when I needed joint replacement surgery in May, and I stopped doing Reiki for a while. I just saw the doctor. Stuff is healing nicely. I have 6 more weeks of physical therapy now, which I think is going to take me into Halloween-like time. And I don't know what I want to do there either, you know. So I spent this summer off from all these things that I used to be and do, kind of embracing the whole concept of the hanged man. In fact, the hanged man was dogging me all summer long. It was literally stalking me. I got a reading from a really good friend of mine, Kasha, who's Tarot Map here on YouTube. Kasha did a reading for me and got the hangman for me there. The hangman, I'm like, yeah, it's everywhere. So I spent the summer, I embraced that. I just embraced this hangman notion where I'm hanging and I don't know what I'm going to do. And the hangman is hanging upside down because he needs to see something from a new perspective, and you can only see it if you hang upside down for a long time, if you look at things completely differently from the way you looked at them before, and if you wait a long time, and if you think a long time. And so that's what I've been doing for months and months and months. And I have been using a lot of tools for my inner work over the years. I call it inner work. It's kind of called that in Waldorf schooling, I think, and I kind of picked that up, but I think of it as inner work anyway. Spiritual work, emotional healing work, meditation, and anthroposophy, and my faith. I consider myself an esoteric Christian. Prayer, spiritual development. I see a trauma therapist who's amazing. I do Reiki. I work with spirit guides and shamanic journeying, and I do journaling, and I use tarot. So I spent many, many years kind of uncovering and looking for that person who's under there. And I did a lot of that over the last couple of months of this summer from a completely new perspective, you know, turned upside down as this hangman. In fact, I drew some cards for this particular video because I kind of wanted to know what tack should I take in just even like talking about my decision making. Should I bother? Should I just say, hey, I have a new name, you know, if anybody cares, there it is, you know, or should I talk about it? And I used this deck. This is the back. It's called the, White Rabbit Oracle. It's an indie deck available from Etsy, from the White Rabbit. I think it's called the White Rabbit Shop on Etsy. And these, I adore these cards. It's such an interesting oracle. It's huge. There are a ton of cards. I can't remember how many they are. I'm sorry. But they're really beautiful. They're done in a collage. I'm sorry. I can't hold up things yet in this hand. They're done in a collage style, but very, very artsy. Is that music too loud again? I just turned it down because I don't want to keep doing that. So they're done in a really fun collage style, but they cover, I mean, how great is that card? Oh, I love that card. They cover some topics that are not going to be in an ordinary oracle deck, and I've been using this for several months for some really interesting kinds of readings, like really unusual things, and I've had some really unusual experiences with this deck. So I've actually been thinking about maybe doing a walkthrough or at least a little review if anybody's interested. I'd be happy to do it because the deck is super cool and it isn't one I normally would have looked at. This picture you've seen before. It's in the Vintage Wisdom. I think it's in the Vintage Wisdom Oracle. Anyway, but it's I love, surprise. I love that card. It's like, it's a great deck, and it reads for weird things really, really well. So I would like to talk about that at some point, I think, because I've been using it for some weird stuff. But I drew a couple of cards just to see what approach I should take talking to you guys about it. And these were the two cards that I drew: discernment and choice. So that's the reason I was kind of telling you some of this background stuff, like, you know, about how I'm making these choices, moving to a place from kind of like I talked about at the beginning, happenstance, where kind of things happen and I go with the flow, to maybe not that so much, maybe to a place where I'm making these very specific discerning choices, and from somewhere in here. And I spent a long time figuring out who that person was in here. And when Gracie was little, my youngest daughter was little, you've maybe met her on the channel before if you've seen any of my other videos, we had a desktop computer. She was probably 7 or 8. She was pretty little. And it was the family desktop computer that sat on the kitchen table in the kitchen so I could keep an eye on everybody. And there was a folder on the desktop where I kept things that I didn't have a label really for. I just called it the miscellaneous folder. And I shoved stuff in there and then I would look at it later. And miscellaneous folder, MISC. And one day Gracie was in there reading all of the names of the different things that were on the desktop. And she saw that miscellaneous folder and she said, MISC, it's the MISC folder. And she said, it's called the MISC folder, Mommy, because this is where you keep all of your mystical stuff. I just thought that was like it's funny how kids say wise things, isn't it? Your mystical stuff in the MISC folder. And there's wise things from our inner child too, right? And that's part of the process. And so as I thought about this process, I wasn't completely sure that I was ever really Lotus Intuitive me. I mean, it was a name for a business or a website that I thought people could feel comfortable about. But it wasn't the name of a person, me anyway. It wasn't the name of a person with a voice. A YouTube channel is a voice. It's my voice. And it isn't one where I have to worry about looking acceptable because it's my story. And that's the point, I think, to tell our story, to tell our truth, to own our truth. And all the best stories are true. And as every tarot reader knows, all the deepest truths, right, can sometimes be best told in story form. And so this is what started with this practical decision. Are you going to renew a website or not? Am I going to pay the money to renew it or not? Domain name is expiring. But led me to examining and making a choice. There. Look how great she is. I think she's over Times Square. Can you see that? How gorgeous is that card? I just love it. And so the choice was things like, who's the real me? Well, at the moment, the real me is a person without a job, right? I'm not a homeschooling mother anymore. I'm not a Reiki master teacher in practice at the moment. I'm not a person who has to look normal or who maybe wants to look normal even. I'm not a person who has to make people comfortable or feel okay. But then I realized as I was saying these things, I'm not. I don't want to be defined by what I'm not. I want to be defined by what I am. I'm a person who loves to share things. I like to ponder ideas. I'm pretty self-sufficient. I've always had to be pretty self-sufficient. I'm a person who loves tarot, and I love philosophy and spirituality and healing. And I'm a person who brings my whole history and my story to the table, to the desktop, where I've got the little folder full of all my mystical things. Not happenstance, but choosing and owning who I am. And because who I am is enough. Because I am enough. And so I pull off all those hats, and I take off all those hats that I was wearing to see what I really look like underneath. And we brainstormed who I am underneath all those hats. And Thrifty Mystic came to mind. And so that's how it happened. Who knows? You know, I think maybe it's going to be good enough for now. So that was the long story, maybe, of why I decided to change the name on the channel and on my Instagram account, if anybody's interested, because I'm not, you know, I don't know if I ever was Lotus Intuitive. So anyway, that's me now. I hope it doesn't cause too much confusion, but I figure people will get used to it quickly enough, or they won't. And that's okay too. So I have a lot of really fun videos that I want to get moving on, and some challenges and some other things, and I look forward to moving into the autumn, and this is my favorite time of year. Autumn, and then Halloween, and then Christmas and Yule and winter, and it should be pretty interesting. So I thank you very much for watching. If you have had any similar experiences that I have had regarding, you know, moving from sometimes happenstance, or from who you were to who you are now, or from happenstance and chance to decision making or whatever, I'd love to hear about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. I look forward to it.